Welcome back to the Quantum Couch. I am your host, Dr. Ina Conboy. Think about the last time you picked up a pen to just jot something down. You probably weren't aware of how your hand moved across the page, the loops you made, the pressure you applied, the way your words tilted or stretched. But handwriting is far more than just a way to record words. It's a living trace of the brain in action. Decades of research in psychology and neuroscience suggest that handwriting can reflect not only motor coordination, but also personality traits, emotional states, and even cognitive function. For instance, studies have shown that people under stress often write with tighter spacing and heavier pressure, while those with more open and flexible thinking may leave broader margins or write with fluid, looping letters. In fact, handwriting has been studied in connection with attention disorders, memory, and even early signs of neurological illness. Today, I'm joined by a professional handwriting analyst who will help us explore this fascinating intersection between science and art. Sheila Lowe is a forensic handwriting examiner, court-qualified handwriting expert, author, and educator with over 50 years of experience decoding the written word. Her nonfiction books include, among others, Reading Between the Lines, Handwriting Decoded, and her memoir, Growing from the Ashes. In the best-selling Forensic Handwriting Suspense series, Sheila's real-world expertise drives unforgettable fiction as she bridges science and mystery with every stroke of the pen. Her Beyond the Veil Paranormal Suspense series features a woman who talks to dead people. A sought-after speaker, she's appeared on major media platforms and spoken at conferences around the globe, continuing to captivate forensic professionals and mystery lovers alike. She is currently the president of the American Handwriting Analysis Foundation and is on the board of directors of the Scientific Association of Forensic Examiners, where she serves as ethics chair. I am so lucky to have you on my podcast, Sheila. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
So let's just dig in because I have been really excited about having you on. I have purchased and read a few, partially not all, of Sheila's books. And in your book, Reading Between the Lines, Decoding Handwriting, you write, handwriting takes a psychic photograph of the hidden part of the Freud's iceberg, as sort of EEG, brainwave recording of personality. In fact, handwriting analysts believe that brain writing is a more descriptive term than handwriting. Body language, tone of voice, and facial expression are also important projections of personality. But unlike those outward manifestations that can be changed to suit the occasion, handwriting always tells the truth, even when the writer is not aware of it. This is so beautifully written. Could we start by any chance, Sheila, with trying to understand the basics first? What is graphology and what do you do with it?
Sure. And I don't use the word graphology a lot these days because people tend to think it means like astrology, which it's not like that. But that the basic term for what I do is graphology, and it, as I understand it, comes from two Greek words, graphine and logos. So it's like the word about writing. So that's basically what it is, an analysis of writing, what it means. And I work in two related but separate areas of handwriting. And for the first many years of my practice, I did personality assessment. And most of my work was with employers who wanted to know about the people that they were hiring. So I would give them a personality profile based on the particular personality traits that they felt were beneficial and favorable in a particular position. So I'd have the employer give me a list of those traits, and I would be looking for those and other things as I analyzed the handwriting. So I've calculated about 15,000 of those kinds of reports over my long
Wow.
career. But
What
I
kind of
also,
employers would hire you to do this? Can you give
oh,
us a few examples?
lots of different ones, from small ones like dentists and chiropractors
Oh, wow.
to um, employment agencies who were hiring salespeople, lots of salespeople, and also companies who were hiring for big executive positions where they really needed to know they were getting the right person for the
Mm,
job. So it was not my job to stop good people getting a job, but just to, and I would never say you should or shouldn't hire this
mhm,
person, because I always wanted them to use my report as part of the toolbox, along
mhm,
with the personal interview, background checks, and skills. But what it seems that research has found is that it's not skill problems that people usually get fired for. It's personality issues. So this is one way of helping.
mhm. And then you said you also do another part as well.
Yes. On the other side, and what I do most now, I mean, that was what I did most for the first two-thirds of my career.
Mhm,
Now, most of what I do is handwriting authentication. So, as I like to say, as an example, dear old dad runs off with a bimbo and later dies, and a new will comes up, cutting out the children from the first marriage.
mhm.
And so they'll come to someone like me and saying, this is not my dad's signature. Can you prove it in court? So, but of course, there are lots of other. I find that family members trying to, I'll put it politely, cheat each other is a very large part of my practice. But there are also other things like contracts and anonymous notes and anything that has to do with questionable handwriting. Did or did not this person write this particular? Could be a signature. Most of the time, it's a signature, but it could also be other writing, like a holographic will, which is all handwritten. Things like that.
Oh, wow. So you mentioned earlier as well when you and I talked outside of this podcast that you present in court, you testify in court.
Yes.
What do you usually end up testifying in court about? Is this about the family wills and such, or is there something else?
Yeah. That's the types of cases that I just mentioned. Some
Mm-hmm.
of them, very few of my cases ever go to court. Usually they'll settle, and
Mm-hmm.
that is the goal. But
Mm-hmm.
I do criminal trials too. And I just had one case that had to do with writing on an autopsy report. So there's all sorts of different ways that handwriting can come up in a forensic way.
So, for example, the writing on the autopsy report was the question whether it was valid or was it written in afterwards?
The question was, who wrote it?
Who? Okay.
Was it written by the person who supposedly had written it? And that it's a murder trial, so it was very important.
So, how often does your testimony end up being very important to the case that, like, it really makes it strong or weak depending on what is presented?
It depends on the case. In most cases, the handwriting part is just one of the parts. It's important, but it's not the only thing. In some cases, it's the really big thing.
So, you are authenticating signatures a lot. With what percentage of accuracy, approximately? Obviously, this is an approximate. How accurate is your validation or authentication of the signature?
Well, how can I ever know that for sure? I am assuming that I
Touche.
am
Okay.
correct. You know, in in the personality assessment,
Hmm.
I like to say, and most professionals will say, given an ideal sample to work with, I would say I'm 80% accurate, at least. And
Mm.
that has proven when I get feedback. Nobody's going to be 100% because obviously human behavior is so complex. There's so many different factors. And handwriting, as far as personality goes, it tells, like I said in the book, it tells the truth. And it always
Mhm.
tells the truth, but it doesn't tell the whole truth all the time because there are too many other things. Handwriting shows potential. It's not like a crystal ball where you can going to say that this person is going to act out on these bad potentials. It has its limits.
What can you tell about personality in the handwriting, and what do you think you can't really tell? Are there some things that are difficult to tell?
Well, as a matter of fact, a new client just contacted me, and one of the things they wanted to know about this person they were considering hiring for a very responsible position is truthfulness. And I said, I cannot guarantee to tell you that this person is being truthful. Sometimes, if the person is writing a statement about something, you can tell in different ways whether they are being truthful in that statement. But ordinary handwriting, I can look at the writing and say, yeah, there are certain factors that tell me this person is maybe situationally honest. Maybe they're not just a, complete jerk and liar, but it may be confined to specific situations. So there's no this means that relationship that stays the same in handwriting. You have in the style of analysis that I do, which is called gestalt analysis, you have to look at the whole picture always. And what appears in one particular handwriting, characteristics in the writing, may be interpreted somewhat differently than those same characteristics in another writing where they're surrounded by other, types of information.
So let's say an employer comes to you and asks you to do a report on a potential employee. Can you, by any chance, run us by how this report gets created? What do you do for analysis? What do you look at? Maybe even start with what do you even need to look at it?
I want to go back because I didn't answer your question about what you can tell from handwriting. So, what you can tell, there are so many variables in personality as in handwriting, but the general kinds of things that you can tell would be like social skills, thinking style, state of the ego, ego needs versus ego strength.
Hmm.
I'm trying to think, organization and fears and defenses, vitality, stamina, sex drive, things like that. So those are big general categories. Things that you can't tell, can't conclusively tell from handwriting which hand a person writes with, or their age. Their chronological age you can't tell, but you'll tell their maturity level.
Hmm.
And certainly you can't tell things like their religion, but you may see if they're a spiritual type of person. And as I said, handwriting is only potential. So you can describe what their personality is at the time they wrote and how it reflects the past,
Hmm.
but you can't predict what they're going to do in the future. Only,
Sure.
only as it reflects the past.
So you mentioned that you could tell certain things like stamina or even spirituality, possibly. How are you able to tell that? What do you look at usually?
Well, again, it's no, this means that. I'm looking at the whole picture of the handwriting. And of course, with nearly 60 years of experience, I've developed some intuition about it. But
Hmm.
anything that I talk about in the handwriting, I can show you where I found it, but it's not easy because you sort of have to know handwriting analysis
So
to be
it's
able.
not like, oh, this person dotted the I in a specific way. This is more taking in the general picture, what the handwriting looks like and feels
Exactly.
like.
Yeah, and I like to compare it. The two methods of it. Let me just say that there's two major methods of handwriting analysis, and there is one where there's this means that. Like if you
Hmm.
dot your I like this, it means you're loyal, or if you cross your T up high, it means you have high goals.
Hmm.
That may be true, but it doesn't really tell you whether the person has the stamina to meet their goals, if they're goal driven, or if they just kind of sit there and have high goals but never do anything about it. So I find that method that works for some people. You build the picture of personality up piece by piece by piece. And it's like looking at handwriting through a microscope. You have a very small field of vision. You see a little tiny bit at a time. So it's atomistic. And that appeals to people who are very left-brained, very logical.
Hmm.
The other style of analysis that I teach and that I have found effective for me is a more right-brain approach. And according to Dr. Ned Herman, I'm a split-brained, so I could go either way. But this is more like looking through a telescope. So you're seeing the whole picture of the way the writing is spaced on the paper and the writing form, which is the letter designs, and the writing movement, which is a very complex combination of things like speed and pressure and rhythm and a lot of other things.
So, when an employer comes to you asking for a report, how do you even begin to put one together? What do you need? And then what is your process in trying to analyze an employee's personality, potential employees?
Well, first, I have them give me a list of the personality traits and also a job description because I
Hmm.
want to know what this person is going to be doing as I'm looking to see whether I feel that they're a good fit for that. And and then I just start making notes about the overview of the personality, what type they are, and from my experience, what I know about them. It's like Felix Klein was one of the greats in my field. He was an Austrian graphologist, and in fact, during World War II, you could say that handwriting analysis saved his life in Buchenwald concentration camp.
Hmm.
I learned a lot from him. But he used to say, if you know the type, you know everything. So there's lots of different typologies like the Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram and others. And so I've studied some of those, and they're helpful in sort of pinning down because a personality it needs to be really in a creative, people-oriented kind of position is not going to have the same handwriting as a mechanic or a teacher. So you look at those generalities first through the telescope, and then you sort of narrow it down and compare what is there to what the employer is looking for. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Can you maybe give us just a few examples, watered down to an understanding of a person who obviously does not know much about graphology? Um, what do you look at? Like, what are the first things you look at? Do you look at spacing, the size of letters, the slant, kind of what? I mean, I'm sure you look at all of it, but
Oh, that's the thing. I'm looking at the handwriting sample as if it was a photograph, a picture.
Mhm.
When you look at a photo, how do you know what you're looking at? How do you, it, I'm not saying that well, but if you're looking at a photograph, just as a photo, how do you pick it apart? You're not going to say, oh, this person has brown hair and blue eyes, and they have a nose and two ears and so on. We don't do that. And as a gestalt graphologist, I don't do that
Mhm.
with handwriting. So because of my training and experience, I look at the writing and I get a first impression. And
Mhm.
it's based on science, but it's still a gut reaction.
Hmm.
So I'm going to look at a handwriting differently if it's big and loopy and takes up a lot of space on a page than if it's small and cramped and all in one corner. So
So your first impressions of handwriting are important to you?
absolutely.
What kind of first impressions can you get or have you gotten in the past?
Well, all right. So looking at the gestalt, there is a strong, weak, or disturbed gestalt.
Hmm.
And if it's strong, it's good. It doesn't mean it's a good person, but it means it looks well balanced on the page.
Hmm.
So the margins are going to be, pretty well balanced all around. Not perfect because only machines can be perfect. Um, and then I determine if it's not balanced, if it's weak, if it's a weak gestalt, that means that the writing is not moving on the page. It's very static. Everything is perfect. It's it's got a lot of control. And then if it's disturbed gestalt, that means that there's a lot of movement. It's uncontrolled. It's
Hmm.
all over the place. It's loopy and that sort of thing.
So I was reading your Reading Between the Lines book, and I am only 100 pages in, but it was really interesting because it was talking about um, spacing between letters, also spacing between words, the margin use, either right versus left versus both. It was talking about the spacing between lines. I mean, there's just so much to take in here, and I went cross-eyed when I was reading this, like just trying to
Yeah.
keep track of all of it. So how did you learn to do all this? How did you get into this? I mean, this is truly like an art and science. So
Yeah.
how did you come to this world?
Because it takes a good 2 years of serious study to
Hmm.
really start to get it. I started when I was 17 in 1967, long before you were here.
Hmm.
And I was in high school in my senior year, and my boyfriend's mother had read a book about handwriting analysis, and she analyzed mine and sort of blew me away with all the stuff she said about me. And I didn't realize it at the time, but she was checking me out for her son. We did get married. It lasted 12 years. If I had known about handwriting at the beginning, I might not have married him. But at the time, I was fascinated and I started reading everything I could find at the library or in the bookstore. And after 10 years of doing that and practicing and thinking, I don't get it, because I was looking at the this means that. And I go, yeah, but it doesn't mean that. It's confusing. So I was looking for more. And then one of the books that I read talked about a course called the Handwriting Analysis Workshop Unlimited. And I contacted that person. It was a correspondence course, they called it at the time. Now it's distance learning. And so I took that course and some more courses. And by 1981, I had found the American Handwriting Analysis Foundation had a chapter in where I lived in Southern California. And so I took the certification test and qualified. But it was at that time, in 1977, thereabouts, that I met Felix Klein. And
Hmm.
then I learned about the Gestalt method. And all of a sudden, everything made sense in a way that it hadn't before. And people who take my course, who studied the step-by-step trait, we call it the trait stroke method, many of them, I will say invariably, they will say to me the same thing. Oh, I'm looking at handwriting in a whole different way. Now I get it. Because it shows you the core personality at a glance once you've had, it takes a lot of study and a lot of experience.
I can only imagine. So you mentioned Felix Klein that he got out of the concentration camp partially because of his talents. Do you know the story a little bit more? I would.
Oh, well, there was a story that he told, and it always chokes me up. And he came to the US after the war,
Mhm.
obviously, and lived in New York. Um, the story that he told many times was when he was in the camp and it was in winter and it was freezing and all. Uh, the I don't know if it was if you would call him the commandant, somebody who was in charge
Mhm.
of the camp, had heard about the fact that Felix knew how to analyze handwriting. So one morning they were lined up for roll call, and Felix was called out of the line, which you could imagine would be terrifying if you didn't know what was going on. So the guard took him to, I'm going to call him the captain, took him to the captain's house. And the captain said, I understand that you analyze handwriting. Yes, I want you to do mine. So he took him in the house. You can imagine it's warm after being outside and all the deprivation. And he said he made that analysis last all day long. And at the end of it, the captain says, well, what did you find? And he said, and his heart was in his throat because he wasn't sure how he was going to take it. But he said, you shouldn't be a soldier. You should be a farmer. And the captain said that I was a farmer and I don't like being in the army. And so he said, what would you like? I'll give you what you'd like. And Felix said a cheese sandwich. So the next morning, at roll call again, the soldier comes along, and on the end of his bayonet was a bag with a cheese sandwich in it. This is the part that chokes me up, because it shows who Felix was. And he saved it until the Saturday night when they didn't have to work, and split it into 17 pieces for
Oh my goodness.
his barracks mates. So
That's a beautiful story.
yeah.
So how did he survive the concentration camp?
He found something in handwriting that I guess he probably found in himself. And he said that the prisoners who didn't survive had extremely rigid writing. And the ones who survived, they would get this particular kind of bend that he called directional pressure. And they had to be flexible. And in that way he survived. He was there for more than a year, and he was I think he was also in Auschwitz for a little while. But
Wow.
that was the story. It stuck with me.
Yeah, that story would stick, I think, with most people. It's a story of perseverance and just a beautiful heart and sharing. It's a wonderful story. Again, sad that it had to happen, but
Yes.
it's great to retell.
I always felt like it was like the pinnacle of my career when he referred a client to me for a handwriting authentication case. Wow. That was a long time ago. He died in the 90s. He was 84 or 88.
I wonder if maybe we can switch a little bit, speaking of stories that are sad. I am also reading your book, Growing from the Ashes, which is a beautiful, beautiful book. Sad, beautiful. Can you tell for those that have not read it what this book is about, please?
Yeah, Growing from the Ashes is my memoir that I didn't want to write. And it took me 23 years before I actually wrote it. In 2000, my daughter, well, in 1999, my daughter, who was 26 at the time, Jennifer, met somebody that she was crazy about, and he was too. He wanted to move in with her right away, and she said no because he was married and he had a 9-year-old daughter. And so she said no, he would have to clean that up first. And he immediately filed for divorce. And of course, when your mother is a handwriting analyst, what do? You bring home handwriting, uh, in this case, boyfriend. And he wanted to know what his handwriting said about him. And I looked at it with dismay because he was a federal agent at the time. He worked for the INS, the Immigration Naturalization Service, which I guess is now Homeland Security. And his handwriting had the signs of an authoritarian personality, a lot of rigidity, rule-making, do as I say, not as I do, and that sort of thing. And I told him that's not going to work with Jennifer, because she told me that she said once, not long before this, I've known what I needed since I was 6 years old. You should have let me make my own decisions. And I said, well, that was not my job. So we had a very difficult relationship. Plus, she'd had a head injury as an infant. She fell out of her crib. I will never know how it happened. But the doctors at the time said, no, she seemed fine, but her behavior changed. She started having terrible tantrums every day, and she was really hard to deal with. And when she was 10, 9 or 10, a psychologist said that she exhibited the symptoms of a closed head injury. And she spent 3 months in a behavioral unit in a hospital with other children. And, it wasn't a good thing. She picked up drugs there. And just a lot of bad things happened to her during her life, and she made a lot of bad decisions. So when I saw this handwriting and knowing her handwriting and her as she was, I was very concerned. And I talked to them about it and said to Tom, don't try to tell her what to do because it doesn't work. Well, he started calling me complaining after he moved in, and she would call me and complain about him. And in less than a year, he had killed her and himself. The night that it happened, and I learned about it from their upstairs neighbor, who I took a statement from because the police lied to me, and they gave me 6 different stories. So the night before, I had gone out to dinner with my then husband. So she called me. We were out to dinner, and that's what I said. Can we talk about this tomorrow? Because I'm out to dinner. And she said, sure, no problem. Well, what turned out was that night she and Tom went to a bar called Cook's Corner. And while they were there was a woman there who Tom had had a one-night stand. And Jennifer just went ballistic. And she ended up leaving him there and taking the car and going home. And he had to walk home about 5 miles, I think it was. So what the neighbor told me was that it was about 2:30 in the morning, I believe. I think it was 2:30. He said he heard a noise on the stairs, and then she was outside his apartment. So they lived upstairs, and he lived downstairs. And so he heard her outside his apartment door crying, and he opened the door. He was up watching TV. And he opened the door and asked her what was wrong. And she said, Tom's crazy. And he brought her in his apartment, and he said, you can stay here. And she said, I called 911. And they talked for a few minutes. And then she said, I'm going to go back upstairs and make sure he doesn't hurt my cats. And so she left, and she went back upstairs, and it was quiet for, he said, I don't know, it was probably a half an hour. Meanwhile, 911 doesn't show up. And then he heard her on the stairs again, and he looked out the window, and he said Tom was at the top of the stairs saying, I've got the keys. And she ran down the stairs and started towards the neighbor's apartment, and Tom opened fire. Now, he was an instructor in close combat, and he was using his service weapon. And the neighbor said to me, I'll never forget her eyes. And I said, what do you mean? And he said she was gone instantly. The first shot hit her in the brain, and then he hit her a total of 8 times in every vital organ. And at that point, he started to walk away to his car. He got in his car, and that's when the 911 call was answered, and the police started to drive into the complex. He left the car where it was running, and he went back to her and knelt by her body and kissed her, and then put the gun in his mouth. So, as it turned out, some of the bullets hit the entertainment center of the neighbor and his little girl's bicycle. And his family had to climb over the bodies. The police took them out of the apartment, and they had to climb over them to get out of there. So that was the reason for the book. I always knew I would write about it, but it was too hard. And I kept thinking, what can I write that isn't depressing, because it has such a horrible ending? But all these years later, I realized that I could write about my spiritual journey which includes her. And so finally, that's what I did, pushed by spirit.
You mentioned that this took you obviously in a spiritual journey. Could you tell us a bit more about the spiritual journey and how it led you to where you're at now?
Sure. I grew up in a religious cult that didn't believe that you should have any contact with spirit or dead people. And
Hmm.
that was considered to be, demon possessed if you talk to spirit. And in fact, they said you should not meditate because if you clear your mind, it leaves room for the devil to come in. And my husband, who was very abusive, was a minister. And so, we stayed away from that sort of thing. But so many years later, after divorce, I got kicked out of that religion.
Are you
Thank
talking about
heavens.
Jehovah's Witness?
Yes.
Hmm.
And I was shunned for the second time. They told me I was a danger to the congregation. So that was fine with me by then. And Jennifer had always been looking at, like she was interested in tarot cards and that sort of thing. And I had a business partner who took me to my very first psychic reading, which was really accurate. And so I had started having an interest in it. And in fact, a few weeks before Jennifer was killed, she and Tom came up. They lived about 100 miles south, and they came up to go to the movies to see. She wanted me to see the movie The Sixth Sense. That's hard
Hmm.
to say.
Good movie.
The Sixth Sense. And she sat with me, and I noticed out of the corner of my eye, she kept looking at me to see my reactions. And so she got me more interested in it. And after she was killed, I wanted to know what happened. And immediately she started manifesting that she was here. The next night, I think it was the night, my, my cell phone rang, and I'm listening, hello, hello, and I could hear static along, just like you could hear somebody a long way away through a lot of static. I couldn't tell what was being said. Then my house phone rang, and the same thing happened. And I realized that was her. And have come to believe that when people we love cross over to the other side and we get these manifestations, it's as if, if we go, let's say you go to Europe and you call your family and say, I got here safely, I'm here. They want us to know that that's why they contact us. And things happened, like my brother and I were driving in my car, and the radio started turning up on a particular song, and that had never done it before and didn't do it again.
Hmm.
Um, uh, after before the funeral, she was killed on a Saturday night, and on the Tuesday, I went to pick up her cats. The sheriff's department had taken the cats and kept them in a special place. So I went to take them, and my brother, who lived a long way, had agreed to take them because I already had her other two cats. And so I had them in a box in the car, and normally they would be, meowing and making noise on the trip. And I had her wedding dress that I was going to bury her in. And so the cats were really quiet. And it was raining, and it was just, it was at night, and I was feeling pretty bad a few days after her death. And all of a sudden, the overhead light came on in the car. And it had never done that before, and it never did it again. And I said, yeah, okay, she's here with us. That's why the cats are being quiet. And then at the funeral, um, I was walking. We had to go up a hill. My husband and I were walking behind the hearse, and my two sons were walking with it, and my brother-in-law, former brother, her father's brother, who I was close to. And as they were taking the casket out of the hearse, all of a sudden, that my brother-in-law's car, I mean, his hands were up here with the casket. He wasn't touching his keys, and his car started beep, beep, beep. And we said, there she is. She's with us. Just stuff like that. And
Mhm.
just a lot of things happened. And also to my sons. She, uh, it's just a whole lot of stuff. And I went to, 3 months later, I went to a meeting of John Edward, who,
Mhm.
he didn't have his show yet. He was just getting ready. He was promoting his show, Crossing Over with John Edward. And I didn't know about him, but my sister-in-law called me and she said, this guy's going to be in LA. You should go see him. And I was like, mm. I'd already had some really good readings from a man named Brian Hurst, who's a terrific medium. But at the last minute, I decided to go because it was close to where I lived at the time. So there was probably 1,000 people in that ballroom. It was at a Ramada Inn, big ballroom. And I didn't know anybody there. And I was sitting like towards the back on one side. And he came in, John Edward came in, and he said, I'm gonna tell you about my process, and then I'll probably be getting some messages for you. And he stopped. He goes, wait a minute, somebody wants to come right to the front, just insisting on being heard right now. He says, there's gunshots, it's a murder. And I turned and looked around behind me, and I looked around. A woman stood up a couple of rows behind me, and she said, it's my son. And he said, no, it's a daughter. So nobody else was doing anything, and I was shaking. And so I stood up, and he started talking about, well, he started out about the letter R, which my brother is Richard. And he said, you have a dog that passed. And I said, no, I've never had a dog. And he listened, and he said, oh, but it's your sister's dog. She had a dog that passed. Yes. I said, her dog had passed the year before. And he said, well, I'd said, also, I have an aunt, Rose, who's in spirit. So it could be that R. He said, your daughter wants your sister to know that the dog is with her and he's fine. Something like that. And then he said, two passed at the same time. It happened in February. She knew who shot her. And he went on for several minutes. And then at the end, he said, does one of your sons, and I hadn't said I had sons, but he said, does one of your sons have something to celebrate, like a wedding or birth? And I said, not that I know of. And he said, yes. He was very insistent, yes. And I found out later what he was talking about, which I'm not going to go into here, but my son, when he told me about it, he said, my sister was laughing at me because she knew about this and she knew I wasn't going to tell you. So people who say, oh, John Edward, he reads your mind or he researches you. At that time, there wasn't Google. And he couldn't have read my mind because that wasn't in my mind. And he said also about my father having trouble with his legs. He was diabetic, and that his family spoke two languages, Russian and Polish. And he is the real deal.
Hmm.
So
So this journey took you into a spiritual connection with your daughter in in spirit form. And how did that evolve throughout the years? What have you been doing to connect with her, or what have you been doing to grow spiritually from there on?
yeah, I started doing a lot of reading because I wanted to know what happened after we supposedly die. I learned there is no death. There's life after Earth. And I started meditating because what I was reading in all these books was that you need to meditate. And then I had a boyfriend for 2.5 years, and he suddenly died of a major heart attack.
Hmm.
So that reawakened my interest. And I had some amazing readings, especially with a psychic in England, a medium named Robert Brown. And he just, well, he started out, and this was on the phone, and he knew nothing about me but my name. And the first thing he said was, there's a man standing behind you with his hands on your shoulders, And it's a heart issue. And he says that you shouldn't feel guilty because there was nothing you could have done. And the fact was, without going into the whole thing, I did feel like I should have pushed him more. I offered to take him to the hospital. He was having some chest pains and he wouldn't go. And then he went home, and I spoke to him after he was in the middle of the night. I spoke to him after he went home, and he said, "Yeah, I'm gonna call the night nurse or the 24-hour nurse, and I'll talk to you in the morning." And then at 5:30 in the morning, his son called me from the hospital and said he had gone to the hospital, which was just a mile from his house, and he'd had this massive heart attack, and they worked on him for an hour and couldn't bring him back. So again, I started looking into the afterlife. And somehow, and I don't remember how, I learned about the Afterlife Research Education Institute. And they were having a symposium in Scottsdale, and I went. And then I went again the next year. There were 500 people the first year, 800 people the next year. And at that second one, they had a lot of, individual lectures and breakout rooms and stuff. But at the end, they got everybody together and they said, "We want to start having Zoom sessions." They said, "We want to have different topics. What topics are you interested in? And we'll put groups together who have the same interest." And I said, "I'm interested in automatic writing because I'm a handwriting analyst." So I thought I'll be going to one of these groups and learning about automatic writing. For some reason, they made me the leader of the group. I said, "I don't do automatic writing. I'm too lazy to really try. I've tried it many times, but
Can you explain to those who don't know what automatic writing is, please?
it actually can be many different things." But what I was thinking was that spirit would take hold of my hand and write messages, because I've seen that done before. But it could also be inspired writing. You're hearing in your head messages that you write down, like spiritual dictation. Or you could do it on a computer, on a keyboard. So since then, since 2018, some of the people that I met at the conference, the symposium, joined that group and are still there. And people have come and gone, about 150 people. And I'm still hosting it on the first and third Wednesday of every month at 5:30 Pacific. And anybody's welcome. It doesn't cost anything. We have a discussion. And sometimes, many times now, we started out with that focus on automatic writing. But after a couple of years, we branched out more. And so I started inviting guest speakers on all different topics to do with spirit. And so that's what we do.
Have you learned how to do this automatic writing? Did something go through for you when you're doing it, or have you done it?
I have, yes, but very infrequently. And I think it's something that you need to do regularly. And I'm really not good at that. But I have had some messages that I believe were not from my head.
Do you feel that after all these years, you're still able to connect to Jennifer, or was the connection stronger in the beginning, soon after her death, as opposed to now?
The manifestations are not as strong as they are, but every time I have a mediumship reading, and I have them, for me, they're my form of therapy. And they invariably tell me that she's always around me, that she's there.
Do you feel her?
Sometimes I get this little tingly feeling on my head, and I associate that with her being here.
You continue to connect with her, you continue on your own spiritual journey and trying to understand the afterlife and how it speaks to people in living form. And then you're also continuing to do your handwriting analysis practice, correct? I mean, you're doing kind of these things in parallel. Is that correct?
Yeah, sure.
Do they intersect at all at this point, besides you being the
Well,
president of the automatic writing? But do these two worlds merge, or do you feel like you are these two different worlds?
yeah, well, as a forensic handwriting expert, I can't bring that kind of thing into the
Sure.
courtroom. I'm not looking at handwriting and trying to get psychic phenomena from it. Although I have been told by some medium that it's sort of my form of mediumship. But I think it's just that after so many years of studying and practice, that that's where intuition comes from.
Hmm.
It's from practice. It becomes part of you. So the I always wanted to be a mystery writer, and so what I like to say is, after analyzing so many thousands of handwriting samples, I was ready to kill someone with my pen. So I would like to, at this age, I'm 75, I would like to do less of the forensic work and make my living writing mysteries, which so I've been doing that for a few years now, but it needs to be, I'm not making a living at it, but it's more on a hobby level. But I just learned from Amazon that in the past 4 years, more than 4 million pages of my books have been read.
Wow.
So somebody's reading them. They're out there.
Can you tell us a little bit about your mystery novels? It's a series, correct?
I have two series.
Two
Yeah.
series.
One of them is called the Forensic Handwriting Suspense, Mystery Suspense. They're psychological suspense, really.
Hmm.
They're not like locked room mysteries like Agatha Christie. They're not cozy. Do you know what a cozy mystery is?
No.
That's like Jessica Fletcher in Murder, She Wrote. There's no sex, no bad language, no violence on the page.
Hmm.
Well, mine don't have a lot of that, but there's profanity. And some people object and put nasty reviews on Amazon. But, sometimes it's appropriate.
Are
So
they Jehovah's Witnesses? Is that?
probably, probably my mother. No, not anymore. She's gone now last year. Um, and that's another story. Yes. So in around 1997, I decided it was time for me to start writing a mystery. And so I got started and didn't know what I was doing at all. And I eventually put it in the drawer. And then after Jennifer's death, I was looking for something to occupy my mind other than that. And I pulled it out again. And a guy that I had met as a psychic reader that I'd now known for about 10 years, I suddenly learned that he had published a whole bunch of books with Random House. And one of his books sold 500,000 copies. And, he really knew. So he had taught me how to read tarot. And now he taught me how to write fiction. Because I'd written nonfiction. My first book was
Hmm.
The Complete Idiot's Guide to Handwriting Analysis. And that came out just a few weeks after Jennifer's death. So I started writing this book that I called Poison Pen because the big they say you should write what you know, and I knew about handwriting, so I created Claudia Rose, a character who did the same things as me. She's not me. She's much braver or more foolhardy, and we're not a lot. She likes coffee. I don't. She likes flying. Not me. But we do the same kind of work.
Sounds
And
like my kind of gal.
yeah, she's an adventurer. So so I wrote this story, and a friend talked me into entering it into a contest, the Southwest Writers Contest, and it came in third out of 97 mysteries, which was pretty cool. Although I didn't know what I was doing, I really didn't.
That's wonderful. And you're still publishing? You're still writing new books?
Yes, I'm starting one right now that's in my other series, the Beyond the Veil series.
It sounds really fascinating. Do you pull characters and stories from just the vast experience of your life, or does it just come to you out of thin air?
Oh no, it's the hard work. Some of them are about life. Like in Poison Pen, the first book in the forensic series, it starts out at the funeral of a Hollywood top agent that everybody loves to hate. And the question is, did she actually kill herself? She drowned in her hot tub and had a lot of drugs in her system. Did she actually kill herself? And her business partner says the suicide note, supposed, that says it was fun while it lasted. So he calls Claudia in to examine the note. So that story was not based on, but had a lot of elements of a woman that I knew who was a handwriting analyst. And she died under sort of mysterious circumstances. And I
Hmm.
used some elements of her story to create this character. So, and then in the next book, Written in Blood, there was a you'd think this was a dangerous profession. This a woman named Mary Lynn Bryden had a school in Texas for handwriting analysts, and she was murdered by her boyfriend.
Oh gosh.
And yeah, there was some elements of that story that I knew that I used. So I used just a kernel of it to grow the story. Uh, Dead Right has to do with a dating service, high price dating service where people are dying. And I used to do a lot of work for a very high price dating service. I'm talking about she would charge the women $50,000 for men.
Wow.
Yeah. And like that, book 4 is my revenge book. It's about a religious cult
Hmm.
and so on. So,
Okay. This sounds really interesting. That's going to be on my next to read after I'm done with Growing from the Ashes and reading between the lines because I also got personality and anxiety disorders, but I think I'll use that as like a reference just for my job because that's really helpful. Um, so we're starting to come closer to the end and wrapping up. I am wondering if you are ready for our lightning round that we usually do at the end of the podcast.
okay.
It's going to be just questions and then somewhat quick answers, but you're welcome to go into details if you want to regarding the answer. Do you prefer pen or pencil?
10.
How come?
But a particular type of pen. I prefer the thin tip, the
Mm,
fiber tip, probably. No ballpoint pens. Gel ink is good. And it's also good for writing checks because it's one of the types of ink that won't wash out with chemicals when people are trying to forge and, you know, they wash your check in a chemical and then they write in. So it has your signature, but then they write in a new pay to.
that is really interesting. Did not even know that that even is possible.
Yeah.
Okay. What is your favorite kind of paper to use when writing?
Oh, I'm not I'm sort of picky about that. I usually start out with a lined notepad, and a friend got me a special pad that has paper you can refill. So I like that when I'm starting out. I don't write my whole book by hand, just the outline.
If you could analyze any one person's handwriting from history who you have not analyzed yet, because I know that you have a book, which I also have looked through, that, oh my goodness, I forgot the name of it, where it has the photos of a lot of famous people and your analysis on their handwritings. What is it called again? I'm so sorry.
Handwriting of the famous and infamous.
So, who you have not analyzed yet, who would it be?
Gosh, I have analyzed so many people from history. That book was for I wrote for Barnes and Noble, and they sent me 75 handwriting samples of people that they want
Hmm.
me to talk about. And the earliest one is Galileo. So that's just too hard.
So out of those 75, is there like one that stands out to you for whatever reason?
Jimi Hendrix, he had handwriting that I probably wouldn't have expected, as I haven't looked at it in a long time, but I remember it as being sort of big and bubbly and very expressive. Well, which he certainly was, but it's kind of a feminine looking writing, as I recall.
Hmm.
But Eleanor Roosevelt had really strong, dynamic writing, even more than her husband. I love Hillary Clinton's writing because it's highly simplified and it shows um, quick thinking and getting to the point, getting like just going to the bottom line without a lot of details.
Hmm. It's so interesting. Sheila, thank you so much for being with us today. I really, really appreciate all of your wisdom, you sharing your story about your daughter, and just talking about your journey. It's a very vulnerable subject in various ways, and yet you really open your heart and you share with the world. How can those that are watching and listening find your work, find more about you, maybe get their handwriting analyzed if they so wish, or someone else's that they really trying to figure out?
Yes, yes, they do that. I have two websites. The one for handwriting analysis is just my name, SheilaLowe.com, and people misspell it all the time. It's SheilaLowe. The other one is Sheila Lowe Books, and that's dedicated to the books. So
That's
thanks.
wonderful. And I will include that in the bottom of the podcast and the YouTube channel. Um, well, thank you so much. And I cannot wait to see what else you're going to produce down the line. And I'm really excited about reading the two mystery series that you have come up with.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been delightful.
Thank you. Thank you for tuning in and listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share the Quantum Couch with someone you think might love this space too. If you would like to reach out, you can email me at thequantumcouch@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Just search for The Quantum Couch. Thank you for listening. Until next time, I'm Dr. Ina Conboy. Take good care, stay curious, and keep exploring. The information in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Listening to this podcast does not create a physician-patient relationship with Dr. Ina Conboy or any guest on this podcast. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you heard on this podcast.